Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm just going to take you through how to do our third map. It's very similar to our first map. It uses all the tools in Adobe Illustrator, including the shapes, symbols, arrows, edges, lines, color cells, and the like. So very, very, very similar to the first map. It should be a piece of cake. It's just a matter of capturing the view that is relevant to your site and to your intended area of study, your intended project area. It's just a matter of jiggling through Google Earth Pro for the perfect three-quarter view or bird's eye or aerial view that we have. Again, this imagery is new as of about a year and a half ago, when all of these 3D buildings, or the 3D building layer, the terrain layer came into existence. 2 to 3 years ago, we didn't have any of this information available at this particular level, but this gives a wonderful orientation to the urban fabric, and as well as some of the issues. A three-quarter view or aerial view is also helpful for the public because many folks have difficulty reading a map, reading plan view. They just don't understand it because it's an area of abstraction to them because they don't see the world that way. These three-quarter views or bird's eye views are helpful because you start to see the sides of building elevations and start to recognize landmarks and start to recognize things in the urban fabric, bell towers, street names and things like that. So if we have the roads, 3D buildings, and the terrain turned on, we get a picture very much like this. So quite a few of our streets are going to be named. Remember the Truex rule, in every single map there should be at least 2 streets named, because that way your public can actually orient themselves to a map on their phone or otherwise. But if you have the roads turned on, those labels will show up, and Google Earth conveniently nests them even behind trees and under trees and things like that. If that is not desirable, if you click on or click off and look at the different information that's there, we noticed in our previous study that if you clicked off terrain, that this was actually a more recent photograph. You can see that the street names are much more visible, but you can see that the taller buildings are basically flattened. So depending on what kind of map you want to use, what type of map your aerial view, your project area is going to be, that will lead you to some different decisions about what layers are turned on, what information you have, what version of the map you have, etc. But we can start inspecting some of our industrial land here. Ooh, my. The water tower and the like, and you can start to orient yourself around the site. So I like to pick a strategic view that is going to be of use in the future. Where do I think our development proposal is going to be? What part of the corridor, what part of the neighborhood, part of the district we want to do? If you're working like Derek over in the far east area and thinking about more about house by house or plot by plot infill strategy, you're going to want to zoom in really close and start to tilt around and spin around just in terms of what is the optimal angle as well as the optimal height, if you will. If you were imagining flying over the site, or if you were imagining yourself as a drone over the site, you want to use these arrows in the upper right corner to really strategically pan and scan, like so, and just play around with where we think our imaginary drone is looking. So, it's funny that I mentioned that because our landscape architecture department has a drone now, and they're starting to do quite a bit of surveying and telemetry and imagery with that. So drones will probably be a part of your future professionally, either in the form of property inspection, development proposals. So you're just going to want to play around for a while and find out what is the optimal angle that displays where you think your infill strategy would work. And the far east portion of our site here, as you can see, has plenty of available land. No question about that. And then the three-quarter view gives the landmark view of the bell tower for St. Lawrence, and that becomes noticeable. We can also see a communications tower, the cell tower right here on the edge there, the edge of the railroad track. So play around and find that optimum view. So if you're in the Far East, you want to just play around and get the optimum side that you think displays your intentions clearly. Now, if we turn around and see this is entirely different now, playing with the angle, we can go all the way to the horizon, and that gives quite a bit of orientation. But with downtown in the background, then folks can relate to buildings or places that they recognize and start to see the development infill opportunity in the immediate foreground. That's a form of storytelling in a sense, because the proximity to downtown is part of the marketability and part of the importance of this neighborhood, as the intention might be to help stabilize the neighborhood around this landmark, which is visible from down the Charles Street viewshed and also from down the Pershing Street viewshed. People can relate to St. Lawrence as a landmark in the city. So relating back to downtown might be the optimum viewing angle. So just pan around, take a look, and figure out which side or which view gets you right in there. And so that will lead us to our third map, but it also will probably lead us to further illustrative options in the future portions or modules of the class. If you're not in the central region, and you can just continue exploring, turn back. Just remember one thing about Google Earth: whenever you need to reorient, you go to View, Reset, Tilt, and Compass, and it reorients the map around the cardinal directions. No matter what view you're in, if you get stuck somewhere, just remember that View, Reset, Tilt, and Compass are important things to remember. Google Earth can be very frustrating if you don't reset your tilt and compass. Go around this side, possibly using the switching center, the AT&T Tower switching center as a landmark. That might be an optimal view in terms of all the available land. Good golly, I mean, it's just... and our construction zone, just as a point of reference again, our new construction zone is right here. So a new agri-tech building will be going up shortly. We're also renovating this side of the future building. So that future institutional infill would be part of a diagram or part of a mapping strategy at this particular angle, understanding that the imagery is not 100% up to date. You can see here that the hotel and parking garage were still under construction at this point, so that has been completed. So this imagery is not 100% current, but it's within the last 2 years. Looking forward to the street view on Charles Street, because 2 weeks ago when the Google car drove by, I just happened to be on the street corner, so that'll be the second time I'm going to be featured on Google Street View. So, as Steve Martin said in Jerk, good things are going to happen. That scene where his name is in the phone book for the first time. So, zooming in, maybe this is an optimum angle, and you just want to continue playing with these variables, the sliding scale, the compass itself. So sliding the compass, maybe that's the one, and just figure out which angle is going to be best for you. And then using the pan and tilt functions here to sort of position the camera accordingly. Now, if we're working up in Colorado, there would be mountains in the background, but here in the flatland, of course, it's a clear horizon. There are other natural amenities or other things, lakes or mountains or otherwise, that would become part of the picture. For demonstration purposes, I think I'm going to go with this one because it's such a stark, powerful edge here. How Liberty Street is the boundary, if you will, between the Old West End and what remains of this neighborhood. This is an active church. This used to be the Muncie Greyhound Station years ago, Trailways and Greyhound Station. That's now a nonprofit. Project leadership is there. And then you can start to recall some of the other buildings that we looked at. Our little law office now, which is residential. This is residential. Bridges maintains sliding income residential here. Campus Edge now owns these two houses, my house where I rent, and this the Rainbow Church now being converted into apartments. So quite a few new residential units just in this block of Charles Street have come online in anticipation of Ivy Tech's proximity. Okay, so that one block walk through their surface parking, no man's land, is starting to bring new residential opportunities online. Just like we do in all others, we go to File, Save Image, and our options for the map start to pop up. You might not need the title and description, you probably don't need the legend. I would recommend keeping the compass because this little arrow, while it's not graphically large for our purposes, it is a nice reminder of which way north was. If you forget that somehow or your map becomes divorced from your future mapping, that can be really, really confusing as to which way north actually is. So I do recommend keeping it, but Google Earth Pro does give us the option to shrink it significantly so that the north arrow is conveniently out of the way. This measuring scale is kind of weird in this aerial view, but it does kind of work. And so if you need to measure a parking lot or otherwise here, you can graphically have some reference to the potential of this lot or otherwise. We will measure all of this stuff in much greater detail when we get into SketchUp later on. We'll actually be able to measure things. But Google Earth has a couple of fun things. The measuring tool now works 3D, so that's something. So if I wanted to measure the side of the Fisher building, I could take this measuring line up the side and get an estimate for roughly how tall it is. That's fairly nice. That wasn't possible a couple of years ago. We wanted to clear that out and do it again. I want to get just a sense of the height of the bell tower there. And I doubt that's coming from, but get a little bit closer. You can actually start to get rough estimates for the height of buildings and the like. All of that we had to do by guesstimation or by counting bricks in the past. And so this tool is starting to get a little bit smarter in terms of giving us a ballpark estimate as to how tall this building is. Now 36 feet seems a little short because it's 3.5 stories, but that does get us into the realm of 38 to maybe 40 feet versus the stair tower here on the Fisher building, which, yeah, that's much better. You look at 4 working floors with a combination of maybe 14 feet floor to ceiling plus structure, plus the extra floor here to access the roof. Yeah, 60 feet is pretty close. Pretty good ballpark figure for how tall that is. We did not have that capability a few years ago. So this is getting smarter and giving us more information to allow us to estimate the heights of buildings. Any questions about that? Well, I'm gonna go in here, back in here, and then save image. I can always X out of it whenever I want to make more adjustments. You just have to exit that print view and X out of it. So if you get stuck, the reason is that Google is still assuming that you're wanting to save the image. So you can always X out of it. Go back into the map options, select those map options, and pick the resolution. So our maximum resolution is 4800, or if we go with the current at 1524, that'll determine the fidelity of the image as when you bring it to Illustrator. Save image. Let's see. Here, West.
Did you say scale is fine for this?
Yeah, you probably don't need it now. Decide if you need it. You can turn it off, or you can just shrink it way down. Go back into Illustrator. I'll open up my template that we've used before. So the same template we used before, or you can even go back into one of your previous projects, open that up, and delete the background and move stuff around, delete stuff off, depending on which layers they're on. So we're getting a good feel for how layers work in Illustrator. A bunch of extra layers here that we probably don't need, so we can delete those. You can see that I basically used the Anderson diagram from my previous work here to basically build a layer structure, and which makes sense for Anderson, doesn't make sense for Muncie. But you can decide, just to delete those layers, get rid of the ones you don't need. Also, that I loaded several color swatches for you. Yeah.
What resolution should we be using when we save?
I would suggest the current for me is 1500. The maximum is going to be 4800.
Okay.
So, depending on what your screen settings are, that'll probably determine. Yeah, so 1623 is pretty good. Yeah, the more pixels, more fidelity of the image, the larger the file is going to be. So if you're going to blow this thing up to 24 by 36, or blow it up as an 8-foot billboard, definitely use the maximum resolution for sure. So go to File, Place. Scale it up. Yes. I'm probably going to take this, cut it out, put it on a different layer, make the active layer kind of different, and then probably lock it down. So lock down that selection and start to work. If necessary, I can also change the opacity. If I'm overwhelmed with color, I can lock it. I can bump down the opacity a little bit. You may not want all of that detail. Let's say sliding it around. Make a decision about how much color, how much impact you want competing with the land use colors that you're going to be describing here. Labels the active layer, and I'm going to place the land use colors. Canvas, I'm going to download and use a little friend here. Place it as part of the legend. I'm not using the scale. You could use the graphic scale, but it's a little bit, it's not as critical when you're looking at an aerial view like this. Some folks may want it. You do need to switch the north arrow around. So you can match the north arrow to its current orientation. So you move all that stuff around. And then any notes that you want to include here are there for you as well. All right. From this point forward, it's just like the plan view, except that we are starting to communicate some potential things here. So let's say I'm interested in infilling a particular area. I might choose a color or shade to start to do that. As a fill, I might start to pick a stroke value, uniform, basic, let's say 12 points. Then I'll go into the stroke menu, making sure you have stroke options open. I noticed in one of the computers last week that none of this was visible until you open up the stroke options, so look for that. And I can pick a dash line and start to tell Illustrator how many points of space in between dashes. And then I can start to draw a shape. So grabbing the pen tool, let's say I was interested in starting to think about infilling around these buildings. Let's say the bus station is bye-bye. Let's say we start to really think strategically about using more of the parking garage. We've got a bit of controversy about who's using it or it's not being used. It is for the hotel, but in theory, other people should be using it. It's not full. I've got to make sure that this object is in the foreground, and I've got to make sure this object has some fill in it. At the moment, it doesn't. So I can pick a color that has some impact. I'll pick a stroke again. Let's say 12 point, even more, 16, uniform, basic, full opacity, back into the stroke menu. A dash line, 6 points in between, no arrowheads. Think about corners, maybe you want a rounded corner, those options here for rounded corners or otherwise. And now my stroke is white, I want it red. But my entire shape is now covering up all that information. So I simply switch down my opacity to say 50%. And that can start to illustrate an impact study area. So this might be your intended area of infill. Using those same styles, I'm going to come up here and start to draw boxes around these. And the pen tool will take those settings and will implement them, provided it remembers. Sometimes it doesn't remember. It didn't. I'll say. Dash line, 6 point. Corner style, corner, stroke, 12 or 14. What is that? I didn't complete the square, that's and it's in the distance, so I would probably do some adjustments here. I would probably pull that down to 10. Foreground one was 16 point. That one doesn't need to be that thick. But keeping this uniform basic, and then turning down its opacity again to 50-ish%. We're now starting to illustrate the study area. I'll open back up the layers menu. I can grab anything in Adobe. I can grab something and I can move it to another layer. If I've drawn it on the wrong layer, here's the initial study area layer already in the menu. My menu, which is taken forward from the Anderson maps, paste in place. I'll just paste it back in place. This is now isolated on the initial layer, study area layer. I've got another layer up here built in called symbols. Again, I've deleted all the other ones from Anderson that I didn't need. So now I can start bringing in symbols. So if we go to the canvas, we're back into the friends here. Start downloading those to the desktop or to actually drag that directly in, or you can place it. So we start pointing out different study areas. I'm gonna make another, whoop, I'm gonna make another layer. Make a new layer, I just go down here to create new layer. It's a new page that's down here. I'm gonna give that a name. Other buildings. And we're going to start drawing and describing their land uses using different colors and different line types. So, using the pen tool once again, I'll start drawing around the convention center. Right now, the previous settings are already saved, so it's going to look kind of funky. Look like it's from the 70s. Disco era. And you'll notice it's covering up nice stuff. You can adjust quickly, you can adjust the opacity as you work. Just come over here, grab that, turn the opacity down to 50-ish%. Uniform basic. But that's a special use building, so I go into my land use colors and make that blue. And then I decide what kind of stroke I want. Maybe it's no stroke, maybe it's nothing. At the moment it is a 16-point uniform stroke dashed line. Go back into the stroke menu, turn off the dashed line. Now there's a solid line around it. If you like the look of that, great. Okay. If not, turn it off. It's kind of up to you. A little bit of problems with it here. It's not bad. Okay, so that's this is now starting to describe to our public the different land uses that we are observing immediately around our site. Why is this important? Because taller buildings may have multiple uses. In the case of the Fisher Building, there are 2 land uses represented, both institutional and commercial. So if we were to do that, I'm going to zoom in just for some clarity. This is not the case for all of you, but in the future, if you're starting to work in taller buildings, then you will start to see different uses coming together. The top floor of the Fisher Building is commercial. That's where the Star Press remains, as long as we have an independent newspaper, and once that is. Don't know how much longer that's going to last. So that should be pink. Pink. That's opacity. Directly below it, do some blue. Draw around the edge, use the previous points as anchors.
May I ask you a question?
Yep.
With that pen tool,
Yep.
I think I just figured it out. So if you don't change the previous color,
It's going to use the, it's just going to use what you have in there.
thank you.
So you can keep using it and then change it, or you can change it and use it. Totally up to you. Now, forward window. All right. You need to change the color of this because pink could be confusing. Basically, you're proposing all commercial. So you could pick a more neutral color or a more eye-catching color. Just so you understand what you're communicating here, and that you're just trying to bring emphasis to the potential study area. So pick a color that's going to be either relative to what you think is you're heading, or pick a fairly neutral color that just visually tells your audience what you're working with. And then from there, then you can start to label streets and buildings. So I go to my layers, and I go to labels. All my labels are on that active layer at the moment. Back to the active layer underneath. Horizon, convention, center. At the moment, it's a certain font. Take a look at a couple of different fonts. Century Gothic, Impact, Helvetica are popular in this department. Why? But they are. They read well from a distance. So thinking about size and paragraph style, align left or align center, these are all options for you. And then determine what color you want the text to be. Black at the moment with a white stroke works really well for me because that white sets it off for a light color building like that. It would work for color cells like this. You could even use all the white text. So play with that. So let's go all white text with a 1-point black stroke around it. You can see now that each letter has a nice little outline. And that's fairly readable over the color. Once you establish that, your first label, you can copy and paste that a couple of times. So edit copy, edit paste, and we're still working on the active layer. So you just grab that text and modify it. Area. Determine its placement. Primary study area, secondary study area, future phase, etc. And adjust the lettering based on where it is in the diagram. So it's in the background, it could afford to be a little bit smaller. So just make that visual adjustment. Copy, paste. Pointing out landmarks and other buildings. Google Earth has provided some street names, okay? Some are visible, some are not. So make judgments about those. Always grab this, and rotate it. In Illustrator, this is vector. It is not in image at the moment, so rotation has to be a little bit, it's a little bit more tedious. But transform, rotate. It is not this hard in InDesign or Photoshop, trust me, it's just a little bit more tedious in Illustrator. So it estimate roughly what angle that is. Let's say it's 40, in my case, let's say negative 45 degrees. preview. Add more, -50. This is, and it's tedious, I know. 55, 53. InDesign this is much easier, but that gets me in here and allows me to then modify the text to something readable. That may read best as white text, it may read better as black, you decide. So you have the controls. It's possible that it is more readable than black text. This is just because our text in Google Earth is not visible. At least I think it's fairly occluded right there. It's not terribly visible. Okay. Again, object transform, rotate, up, repeated it, turn that around, there, closure. That's better. That's better. We just kind of move this thing around. That's a lot easier. Wow. The technology is wonderful. West Seymour Street in this case. Again, the TrueX rule always had at least 2 streets labeled so that your client can orient themselves to another map, whether it be handheld, mobile, or otherwise. Okay. Back to other buildings. Do we need to label every house? Yes or no? No. Why? It's one huge area. Boom. Bam. Boom. Pow. Pow. All right? What land use is it? No.
Residential.
Bueller. 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 Whatever. Okay, so that is residential district. And then Professor B gave 50%. It's a label. Yep, it's on the right layer. Good. Yes, I just mentioned the TrueX rule. Always label at least 2 streets. Yes. He's happy. Okay. Okay. Thank you for visiting us, Professor Kurtz. Okay. Carry on. Carry on. Carry on. Carry on. All right. Did I get you there? Makes sense? Just like the plan view, isn't it? Same thing.
Every time I do this, it makes a triangle before I can even finish.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yes, it will. Okay. All right.
Fine.
Fine. It's fine. Fine. It'll be fine. Yes, it does. It will be that. We're going to do a study area. Okay. So, use arrows when necessary if you want to point out a one-way street, or you can layer, let's say, the thoroughfare Charles Street over that. It's going to cover up buildings, but you can break arrows, you can pull arrows out beyond this and label them there. Other diagrammatic techniques, or maybe other labels that carry out and back into this using leader lines. But you can get a feel for how we're starting to communicate something to the public or to the client as to what our intentions are. And the adjacent land uses that are potentially impacting our development or will be impacted by our development, and starting to assess their compatibility. Because this is the professional judgment that we as planners start to make when we assess whether or not our development proposal here is going to be a good addition to what's happening here. And of course, Muncie, the question would be, well, what about the parking? What about the arrival to the convention center? What about access to that street? That sort of thing. So judgment and decisions about those future things then can be evaluated from this view and discussed in further detail. You can also start to show options in this particular view. And then in the future, when we get into SketchUp, we'll be showing your development proposal in 3D using a view similar to this. And I'll show you in a future module how to take your SketchUp model and pull it back up into Google Earth. Okay. All right, so that brings us up to speed. I'll stop the video there, and we'll have some time to work for the rest of the